Hi there. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the initial estimates that we have with respect to slot 3. So I'm going to share roughly what score would correspond to what percentile. Again, understand that these are initial estimates that we have based on the inputs that we got from IMS mentors and the students who reported their attempts and roughly the accuracy that they are expecting in each of the slots. So I'll start with VRC. Now VRC, the change that happened this year was of course there were no parajumble questions. So you still had 16 RC and 8 verbal questions, but there was no parajumble. Now this was a surprise element for people who were in slot 1, but for people in slot 2 and 3, of course, because people already knew that there was no parajumble, I think people were mentally better prepared to handle that. Now speaking of this particular slot's difficulty, if you look at the VRC, right, if you look at RC specifically, a lot of questions demanded critical reading of the passage. So it wasn't very straightforward. And this is very similar to what we have seen in the last couple of years when you look at the VRC section. So you'll see that the numbers are not very different from what we said for slot 1 as well as slot 2. Slight bit of difference you will find, plus or minus 2 here and there, because compared to each of the slots. And even for the past CAT data, if you look at it, each of the slots versus score versus percentile figure, this is not very different from that. Okay. In VA, of course, that parajumble change would have stumped quite a few people in the first slot, but in slot 2 and slot 3, that impact would not be felt. Okay. Now, if you look at this slot again, quite a few questions, as I mentioned, demanded critical reading. In the summary questions, especially, it wasn't very straightforward. The options were very close. And this is again generally something that we have seen in CAT. But if you look at the options, they were so close that you might have to, let's say, read the summary question again to actually figure out what is going on. Some of the questions, in fact, had language also, which was very intense to read. And that is why we have set these numbers for VRC. Now, if you look at DLR, there was a change this year. The big change was the increase in the number of questions from 20 to 22, and the composition changed, right? So you had 3 sets of 4 questions each, so that is 12 questions, and 2 sets of 5 questions each, so that is 10. So 12 plus 10, 22 questions in total. Now, out of these, what we are thinking is somebody who is, let's say, thinking of a 99 percentile, that person would have solved 3 sets. So identifying 3 easy sets and doing them within those 40 minutes was definitely possible. If you look at all 5 sets, given the liberty of time, a lot of people will be able to solve all of them, but the constraint of course was how much time you have, which is 40 minutes. So in that period, it was easy to identify 3 sets and do them correctly. And if you get all of them correct, which was again possible, that is why we'll set the 99 percentile mark at 37 roughly. So this is 12 correct questions, or let's say you attempt slightly more, maybe get a couple of them wrong here and there. So 36, 37 is what we are looking at for a 99 percentile. Now, if you are somebody, let's say, who has solved 2 sets correctly, right? So let's say either a 4-4 combination or a 4-5 combination, you're looking at somewhere around 24 to 27 marks, right? Which will put you roughly in this range, which is 90 to 95 percentile. That is what our estimate is based on what we have heard so far with respect to DLR. And doing one set, right? If you're done, let's say, 5 questions set correctly, one set also, you would have been in a position to cross the 75 percentile mark. Okay, so somewhere between 75 to 80 is what we are expecting for DLR. Now, if you look at QA score, right? So QA, again, there were reports that it was very easy in slot 1. A lot of people, in fact, came out and said there were quite a few sitter questions, straightforward questions, and all of that. We didn't see that happen here. So both for DLR and QA, compared to slot 1, they are in fact slightly on the lower side because the paper was slightly more difficult. And that slight is a perception thing, and again, it will vary from person to person. But what we heard from slot 1 and slot 2, this is slightly lower than that. Okay. So if you look at again quant, 99 percentile, we are saying should be around this number, which is 35, 36. How can then that happen? Let's say if you do 12 questions and you get all of them correct, right? You're at 36. Was it possible to do that? The answer is yes. Because in QA, in 40 minutes, it was possible to at least identify, okay, what are the easy questions, at least the easy and moderate ones. Difficult ones where a lot of them were so scary looking that you could have just simply stayed away from them. But easy and moderate, you could have definitely identified those questions and attempted, I would say, for a 99 percentile, 12 questions, 12 to 13 questions. And considering maybe, let's say, you get one question wrong here and there, put number at around 35-36 marks. That's what you're looking at for a 99 percentile. Now, if you had attempted, let's say, somewhere close to 5 to 6 correct questions, because we saw a lot of people saying, what about 5 to 6 attempts, right? That is where I am right now. So 5 to 6 will sit somewhere in between this, right? So that's about 90 to 95 percentile on the quant section, because there were quite a few direct questions, right? So if you look at, let's say, last year, which was horrible, compared to that, definitely there were questions which were straightforward. Questions involving percentage change, questions involving time, speed, distance. There were a couple of questions which were very, very straightforward, right? The question on median, for example. So if you had done all of those questions correctly, identified first of all that, okay, they are the ones that should be done in this test, and done them correctly, it was possible to hit these kind of numbers fairly comfortably, okay? So those are the estimates that we have, and of course, if you look at the overall estimate, slightly lower compared to what we said for slot 1 and 2. So slot 1 and 2, we had put slightly higher numbers than what you see here. So somewhere in 99.5 would be somewhere north of 100, right? So slightly more than 100 should take you to a 99.5, and slightly more than 90, right? So that's what we are saying. Slightly more than 90, if you get somewhere in the 90-95 range, that is where 99 percentile will lie. And last year, for example, 99.5 was 84, right? So if you look at this figure that we have here, that is somewhere around 20 more than what we had last year, right? And that can easily happen because a lot of people were able to attempt one set extra or 3 to 4 extra quant questions, and that will easily translate into that jump of about 20 questions there, 20 marks there, right? So that's what the estimates are for 90 percentile. A 45-47 should be a good number. But of course, once we have more data, we may have to revise that cutoff a little bit there, maybe take it slightly up if a lot of people say that they were able to attempt more questions, right? So that's the overall estimate that we have for slot 3. I hope this has helped you, and we have done the same exercise for slot 1 and slot 2 as well. So have a look at that if you were in slot 1 and slot 2. And if you have any questions, you can always leave it as a comment. Thank you so much for joining. I wish all of you all the best.